Jen Mall, and welcome to Nurse Connect. I am an RN and a board certified nurse coach. I believe that connecting with others is essential to living a happy and fulfilled life, and that sharing our stories not only helps us to heal ourselves, but also helps others by inspiring hope and optimism. I am so grateful to share stories of these incredible nurses on their journey, and I encourage you to find a way to share yours too. Thanks for listening in. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Jen Mall with Nurse Connect podcast, and I'm super excited to have Jennifer Ingall here with me today. One of a former coworker, and just really looking forward to chatting today and seeing where our conversation flows.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we wouldn't mind just getting us started with a little bit about yourself. Kind of how did you get into nursing? What's your experience? Let's just see.
Yeah. So again, I'm Jen Heiselman Ingalls. I am a Sierra College ADN graduate. I started nursing school in 2003, and then I did the accelerated ADN to MSN program at the University of San Francisco, which was fabulous. I got into nursing. It was a little bit roundabout. I think nursing was originally what I wanted to do as a kid, and it was an interest and it was a passion. And then it was interesting. I'm an 80s child, and the AIDS epidemic happened, and I remember well-meaning members of my family in a loving way attempting in the early days of the nursing of the AIDS epidemic, trying to dissuade me from anything, and saying, oh, you have this other interest, do that. And so the first couple of years of me in college at Sierra, I was doing that. I was a double history dance major, lots of interests, lots of passions. And then I had sort of my first adult relationship was yucky and unpleasant. And I remember as a very clear turning point for me. I was planning to transfer to Sac State as a history major, and I had the pleasure of doing a little bit of TAing and independent study for Dr. Dan Defoe, who still teaches.
Yes, he's
Sierra.
Wonderful.
He's a legend.
Love him.
It was in the early days of, this is 2000 now.
Yeah.
It's the fall of 2000, maybe spring of 2001. It was the early days of PowerPoint, and he has given me all these slides from overhead projectors.
Yes.
And then help him turn into PowerPoint. And it was from Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and the aftermath of that. And I was in the history building, and I'm scanning it, and I'm weeping. And he comes in, and he comes alongside me, and he says, I can see, he said it his very Dr. Defoe way.
Yeah.
He said, I can see how much you care about these people and their suffering. And I really think you would be a great history professor, but I think you need to do something where you will take care of this right now. Wow. And then he said a really profound thing. He said, my wife is a nurse and she's coming to lunch. Would you like to talk with her?
Amazing.
And it was like a universe thing.
Wow.
And there was a series of events where I was helping nanny someone, was the child of a friend I grew up with, and the mom of this person that week was also a nurse, and she said exactly the same thing. And I had in my brain, oh, I can't take anatomy and physiology because I can't dissect cats. I love cats. I've always had cats. And her name is Allison Mason here. She's the nurse at Kaiser. I don't know if she's retired yet. Brilliant nurse. She said to me, Jennifer, I know that is hard, but think of the thousands of people that you could help.
Wow.
By dissecting that cat and getting through Linda Banta's anatomy,
Yes, I had her too.
right? And between Dan Defoe and Allison Mason Hare and a couple of other people that the
Yeah.
my yeah, I switched my major, and gosh, did I have to take all the classes
Wow.
over again when I did. Um, and yeah, and I never looked back. I had some big roadblocks, but from that point on, it was just felt like it was a calling.
Yeah.
And it's
Beautiful.
been a really great ride. Yeah, I've worked so many different places in different practice settings. I started at UC Davis. I was there for several years. Um, a little bit of PICU, lots of hematology, oncology, stem cell transplants, and then sort of Roseville, vascular access, outpatient infusion, um, nurse educator,
Oncology educator.
oncology nurse
So,
educator, sepsis champion.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been a really interesting journey, and now academia.
I love it. Oh my gosh. You just brought me down memory road. So we must have been at Sierra College around the same time.
Probably
Because
very
yeah,
similar
I started
time.
nursing school in 2003 and I went to Sac City and we were chatting about your little stint there as a professor for a bit. And I just have just such a love for community college and the ADN
Mm.
programs. And we'll get into a little bit more about what you're doing now because it's just fascinating. But oh, thank you for. I just loved Dr. Defoe, and it was great to reconnect on that. I was like, wow, such a great experience, and it's pretty awesome.
Well, I think one of the reasons that, and I haven't particularly told that story in a while,
Mm,
but one of the reasons it's meaningful for me to recollect on that is that it's the power of an educator to take
yes,
a moment and see a student as human and vulnerable and connect with them and and listen and
yes,
it was a turning point for me. There was a time a couple of years ago where I emailed him and I was like, I'm sure you don't remember me, but what you did really made a difference. And it was very meaningful. And I think it's probably been meaningful to all of the patients that I
yes.
did. And now all of the students that I'm working with.
Beautiful. So share with me a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I am a full-time tenure track faculty at Olympic College, which is a large nursing program. It's a community college in Bremerton, Washington. And we have an associate degree program where we accept 100 students every academic year. We also have a PN, so we have PNs up here, PN program. I don't teach in that. And then we also have an accelerated PN to BSN program and a couple of other really neat things.
Mm-hmm.
I primarily teach in the associate degree program, which is my passion. I love what we call the ATA or the ADN students. And I teach pharmacology, intro to pathophysiology, a bunch of clinicals, and also dosage calculation. Apparently I'm the math faculty up here.
Not the only math I can do.
The old chemo nurse is not probably surprising.
Right.
But yeah.
Oh, that's super cool.
Mhm.
Would you mind touching on what we chatted about with the trauma informed pedagogy that you guys are working on? Because I just feel that is so needed and so fascinating. I'm glad you guys are doing that.
One of the things that the college had as an initiative in general, and I think a lot of the nursing faculty have adopted and pulled into their own pedagogy, and I really took to heart, was the idea of a trauma-informed
Mhm.
pedagogy. We had the opportunity to go to 2 full days of trauma-informed care as instructors.
Mhm.
And this really was from the perspective of looking at what happened to you, the student,
Mhm.
not why are you doing this? What's
Mhm.
wrong? Not asking the question, what's wrong with you? Why are your papers late? Why are you tardy? Why are your scrubs messy? But what happened to you? And I think I've always attempted to approach students as future colleagues with a lot of
Mhm.
give them a lot of dignity and assume good intent. But this really brought a level of understanding. We read a really great intro kind of book, which was an Oprah book club, but it had a lot of neuroscience
I
club.
was just going to ask you
Is it
what
on your
happened to
bookshelf?
you. It's on my
Yes. So
bookshelf.
yes,
It's an incredible book.
we read that as part of the faculty
Yeah.
course. And it was great because flipping that perspective when a student's performance is not what faculty member has as an expectation from the really harsh statements like they're lazy, they're not trying, to what has happened to you and what tools can we as educators provide you.
Yeah.
Has really made a difference. And there's always going to be push back from from some members of the institution or some members of the team, but I've just tried to dive fully into what does that look like for me. So in my classes, I've done things like trying to be neurodiverse supportive. I have baskets of fidgets and chewing gum at the front of my lectures because I teach patho in their second quarter, their big patho class. I have a very long lecture for them in quarters, so it's 4 hours.
Yeah. Wow.
They have like explicit permission to get up and move their bodies whenever they need, stand in the back. And that's not, it seems like a very small thing, but I think explicitly being told from an early point in their training that you are allowed, not only allowed, but encouraged to listen to the needs of your body.
Beautiful.
Is hopefully, my hope is that I'm setting them up to be nurses who listen to their body and go to the bathroom, right?
Yes.
Like that's my ultimate goal, that I'm then also setting them up to be nurses who say, eventually, I can't take that fifth patient. I already have 3 on telly and 1 that I'm going to start an amnio drip on. That fifth isn't safe. Like I'm hoping that we're setting up maybe it's revolutionary, I don't know, but this new paradigm where we have people who are learning to be comfortable setting boundaries as self-care, that self-care is not bubble baths and it's not like hand sanitizer and pizza parties, that self-care is a boundary.
Yes.
And then if my student tells me I have to turn this paper in late because X, and that X is, whatever, that I'm like, oh, okay, you're asking for help. You're using your resources. And maybe that's going to be that student that has that hard conversation with charge or the house soup.
Right.
And that's not something all of my fellow faculty members are comfortable with. But I feel like my students having that type of classroom, having my syllabus set up that way, having my course expectations set up that way is not keeping them from understanding acid-base balance,
right? How to be a nurse,
or the pain ascending and descending pathway. It's not preventing them from doing that, and those are my course outcomes, but it is preserving their dignity as humans and making them feel like when they graduate this course and they flip from being my student to my colleague, right, that we're solid.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, this is incredible. And I really hope this is something that is starting to be transitioned into other programs as well. You're definitely a pioneer here. I see it on the other end. A lot of the nurses I work with, both in my private practice and as a nurse educator, I'm trying to help them through when they're already burned out. They are struggling with compassion fatigue because of so many years that started in nursing school, that you're not allowed to consider what you need. You must put the patient or everybody else before you. And therefore we get to this point where they are so gone as far as they have no idea what they need, what they want, little to no boundaries, resentment builds, frustration. And we see that with people bouncing between departments, thinking the grass is greener somewhere else. And then now, unfortunately, we're seeing so many people leave the profession entirely. And it's so devastating to see that. And so I'm trying to help in my small ways
Mhm.
with nurses in the hospital setting. And I just love that you are setting them up for a more successful life, not just a career, but a more successful life. And I love that.
I teach, so we have this incoming group of 100,
Mm-hmm.
and their very first day. So I'm the core theory instructor for both the first quarter and the second quarter of these associate degree students. And one of my goals for that first week is setting expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a whole slide on boundary setting and what that
Beautiful.
looks like before I get to things like time management and stuff,
Yeah.
which I also talk about in detail. And I have a thing that I started saying um, because I understand what kind of people go into nursing and what kind of people
Mm-hmm.
actually get into our program, which is competitive. Um, we're up here. You have to be accredited. In California, you do not have to be. So
Mm.
both accredited by the by ASIN and by CCNE,
Okay.
extremely rigorous curriculum,
Yeah.
all of these standards, and so people want to come to our school, and so I know what level of study practices they already have. So there's a point where I tell them that if it is the difference between them coming in and getting a 92% or an 88% on my test in the morning, but they could go to insert one, their grandma's birthday party, their
Yeah.
daughter's soccer game, their husband's hockey, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I want them to. I am if they need my permission, I don't care. I
Yeah.
want them to do the thing,
I love
make
that.
the memory. Do not sacrifice your life for that 4%, unless
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to pass my class. Like, seriously,
Yeah.
don't do that for my.
Yeah.
I do not have the ego attached, right?
I love that. You're really giving them that permission,
Yeah.
which they probably haven't gotten to this point.
No,
And
nope.
many nurses, myself included, grew up often as caretakers. So we
Mhm.
naturally fall into nursing as a caretaking profession, or often people pleasers, perfectionists,
Absolutely.
all the P's that Brene Brown speaks
That
of.
oldest child syndrome, even
Oh,
if it's
yeah.
not all of that. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And so when somebody can give you that permission, and it's not always well received at first, but it allows you like it's okay to have that balance, right? We talk about that life balance, work-life balance, and it's almost impossible. But when you say, okay, I'm going to go to bed an hour early instead of staying up until
Mhm.
midnight to cram, or I am going to make that core memory of spending time with my family over
Yeah.
X. And when a professor can give you that kind of permission, that really can help you take that pressure off of yourself a little bit.
One of
Lovely.
the first things that we do in that first couple hours that they spend with me, the first lecture they have,
Mm-hmm.
we open a study on the best ways that people learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I have them look at optimal sleep levels
Mm-hmm.
and study cycling. And so it is couched in terms of this is how you read an abstract. It's
Yeah.
couched in terms of that, but
Sure.
actually what we're doing is look at how much sleep y'all need, right? Look, I don't want you to be cramming for 8 hours. I want you to
Yeah.
read 25 minutes and move your body, right?
Yep.
And so I'm, I don't know, I feel like there, I have many faculty members that are in a similar place to the way that I'm teaching, which is part of why I love working where I work.
Yeah.
I have this incredible dynamic. Our dean of healthcare and then our associate dean of dean of nursing are trauma informed and all about connecting with the students. And so I feel like I have all the support to teach this way. And so many of my colleagues teach in similar ways. And it just, I am hoping that what we do is we don't produce generations of nurses who slide into the fabric of being bullied
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and signing off that they've had breaks that they haven't,
Mm,
and all the rest of that stuff that sets us up for leaving the career in 5 years
yeah.
or burnout or worse.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
colleagues we've lost to suicide, and how tragic is that? I mean, that's not okay. So where can I make that change? Maybe it's
Right.
here.
Yeah. And it can be very overwhelming to think of like, oh, trying to change the profession. And it's multifaceted
It
for
is.
sure. But I think in your small but a very impactful way, you're starting that shift in your little corner of the world with your school. And then that has a ripple effect. And I think that's what we have to just take to her, is that we can't change the world, but we can help with one individual make an
One
impact. And
individual.
then we can little
Yes,
by little start to turn this giant behemoth of a ship around
it
in
is.
nursing.
It does feel, it feels overwhelming.
Mhm.
Um, and it feels overwhelming because, we all became nurses for so many deep reasons, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I got I got this text from a student after my students graduated. We're on quarters, so we go late in the middle. I think pinning was the 18th of June.
Hmm.
My seniors that I had in my clinical section, I gave them all my personal cell phone. I have a work phone, but I gave them my
Yeah.
personal cell. If they needed job references over the summer,
Awesome.
I have to turn in my work phone. And I said, you won't be able to get a hold of me. I'm not at the office, but if you're, if they need to get hold of me for job reference, absolutely. So I got this lovely text in the last 2 weeks from one of my students, and it was really thorough. Hey, Professor Ingalls, because at this college we have like a naming convention. Professor
Okay.
earned doctorates, then last name. So it's Hey, Professor
Okay.
Ingalls, and then she goes on to explain that she'd gotten 3 job offers, which is terrific. And then
Hmm.
she describes the units, and then she's like, I don't know how to pick. Could you give me advice?
Hmm.
And that was so amazing that, here we are, we don't have any necessarily, she doesn't need anything from me.
Sure.
Need me to fill out a letter. She doesn't need me for a reference, but she's coming to me for advice because she trusts me.
Beautiful.
And so I thought about it for a minute, and I said, when I graduated, I'm sure it was the same for you. You had to take what you had to take, and I was lucky I had 2
Mm,
options, and so I took the one that was on days because I knew that I would do more poorly, like my body would do more
sure.
poorly at night. And so the advice that I gave to her was to interview the unit culture as much
Mm,
as possible. Where did it feel like the nurses had, more collaboration? Where did
hmm.
they appear that, the charge nurses were supporting them and the aides were always, where did it seem
Perfect.
like she wanted to work? So if she was a hot commodity, if she was in demand, then she could be picky.
Beautiful.
And then I tagged on at the end and I said, "You're a colleague now. My friends call me Jen. My colleagues call me Jen." And she texts back and she's like, "Oh, worthy." And I was like, "You've always been worthy. It was just school. It's not that
Yeah.
thing." But I just felt like, this is like the casting your bread onto
Hmm.
the water and then it comes back.
Beautiful.
Yeah, hopefully she's gonna pick of those 3 units, the one
Yeah.
that's gonna be the most likely to let her be healthy and
Oh,
successful.
yes.
So I
Oh,
felt
I love that. It seems like I'm sure your days are long and hard, but it does
it
seem like you
can
have some
be.
good positive things that come along with the job too.
I am so fortunate. I don't know how it happens because my students are in nursing school, which
Mm,
means they're exhausted. Many of them are working, which I think was
hmm.
much less of a thing when we were in school.
Oh,
Almost
I had 2 jobs.
so
It was a lot.
I did have 2 jobs, but they were not the equivalent of a ton.
Hmm.
But many of my students work as techs up
Yeah.
here. up here, ED techs have a very wide scope.
Oh,
Um, and so a lot of my students work as ED techs and have like former EMS experience, or a lot of them are aides, and they're working easily 310s, 312s,
mhm.
and going to school full time, which
Yeah,
is
it's hard.
astonishing to me. I
Very
have
hard.
so much respect for them.
Yeah.
Um, but they manage to still at the end of the quarter, I get these lovely notes and I cherish them. Yeah. And
Oh,
then when my weeks are extremely busy, I'm a single mom and I live an hour away. So like my
mhm.
time management during the quarter is
You
intense.
have to be. Yeah.
It's down to the minute. I hold on to that, I hold on to those notes,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah.
that's that
I
you're
think,
making a difference.
yeah. And I think that's so important in a career because there's always going to be things that are hard. An hour commute and being a single mom is so hard. But the
Yeah.
why, like the why are you doing this is greater than the challenges that come along with that. And so, like, when you get those positive things, even just like a little hand on a shoulder, thanks for making a difference. Like
Yeah.
those things add up. But you really have to kind of intentionally savor them because it can be
You
really easy
do.
to focus on the negative stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
I have a memory from when I was in clinical practice. I was at the infusion center. It was the old infusion center that we had in building
Mhm.
2. And I was charge, and one of our patients with a super complex disease process was, she's a patient, Dr. Reddy's, was finishing up her chemo.
Mm.
And then we knew that you just sort of hold your breath and then you wait, and there's scans and tumor markers. And this was a salvage chemo regimen. And so
Mm.
we were all giving her hugs. And I came out from behind. I don't know if you remember, but there was that little cubby. I came out from behind the
Yeah.
cubby to give her a hug.
Mm.
And she sort of stopped and she put her hand on my back and she said, Jen, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm one of your success stories.
Mm.
And I will never forget how that made me feel,
Mhm.
because I had started her chemo when we had started, and I had done the chemo teach.
Yeah.
This is how your drug works, and this is how it's going to make you feel. And in that moment, it was as though she was taking care of me.
Beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. Those little things,
Mm.
hold on to it.
Mhm. And this many years later, how many years later,
Oh,
right? 10,
that was
15
before
years.
that was before my daughter was born. Yeah.
Yeah. So you still can feel that emotion and that connection with that other human. And that's just so special. And I think as nurses, we're so blessed to have those moments of impact
It
and
is a
connection.
privilege to be able to take care
Yeah.
of folks when they let us.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And each other. Yeah. And I
Yes.
think that's what I've been leaning into so much. And I think you see that with your students, is that
Mhm.
how critical it is that we connect with each other and we help each other through. Because this is a beautiful profession. It's incredible. It's so many opportunities, so many ways to make an impact, but it can also be very difficult
I
in a lot of
think
ways.
I think when you were talking about the taking care of each other thing,
Hmm.
that's one of and I've talked about that with colleagues at work who are, really building in the trauma informed pedagogy, that, oh gosh, how hard this is. I have to start with myself. I can't just teach this to the students. I have to
Yes.
model this to myself. I have to model boundaries. I have to model self-care.
Yes.
One of my colleagues is just so diligent about exercising, and all it, just like really diligent about it. And she's like, this is one of the ways that I make sure that I am modeling self-care as a nurse. And I was like, Andrea, this is amazing that you're doing
Yes.
that. Because it has to start with us.
100%.
Hard.
Yeah, it
So
is hard. It is hard, but it's so important. We cannot truly, freely, lovingly give to others with no strings attached unless we're fully
hard.
taking care of ourselves. But that is incredibly difficult to do when we're groomed from the beginning not to. So I just
Huh.
love that you are changing that culture.
And I think what you were saying, like using that groomed word, I think is
Mhm.
very important to notice because changing narratives and changing paradigms from a martyr perspective,
Mhm.
a suffering perspective. I when I'm teaching renal, I use myself as an example when I was
Mm.
a nurse of um, giving myself pylo in the first year because
Gosh.
I did not take my new grad on a complex heme malignancy floor, did not take my breaks, did not pee, did not
Gosh.
hydrate, had a UTI, it malingered, it went north.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I got sick fast. But I'm like, y'all, that's just like basic self-care.
Mhm.
So it was fascinating. I've taught that patho for several years, and I just happened to mention it to a colleague, Becky Schultz, almost Dr. Becky Schultz, in her
Yep.
office next to me. And she said, "Oh, Jen, that happened to me too." And then we looked at each other and we were like,
Really.
what are the odds? If it's happened to two nurses, and she's an old oncology nurse, she's amazing, brilliant. Um,
Yeah.
this has happened to more than
Yes.
one nurse across the country where we are literally trained to ignore our basic bodily functions
Yeah.
due to whatever.
Yeah. And it's almost a badge of honor to
Yes.
do that.
People will be
And
like, well, I survived off the custard cup and the whatever.
yeah. Yeah. So I think I'm slowly trying to kind of call that out and gently and lovingly
Yeah.
that, is that what's best for you? Well, it doesn't matter what's best for me. No, it does. You are important. And it's important that you take care of yourself because we can't expect anybody else to do that for us. We have to do that for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, while I noticed some things that our physician colleagues do really well,
Hmm.
like medical school and residency is
Yes.
daunting, like so
Yes.
daunting. Their calls are ridiculous and oppressive. But I noticed most of my physician and certainly my PA colleagues would never miss a workout,
Hmm.
would never miss a lunch. And
Interesting.
I I don't know if that's just because it's the culture up here. I don't
Yeah.
think I think a lot of it was still the culture that I saw in California. And I think that that's great. But I'm like,
Yeah.
how is that provider level culture, self-care,
Hmm. Hmm.
so different
Interesting.
than the nursing culture? Like their training is ruling,
Yes.
ruling. And yet, as professionals, there's some piece where mentally they have that
Yeah.
together.
That
And know,
is interesting. But I also, old school thinking, but about nurses being servants to doctors. Like,
absolutely.
and I almost kind of see that back in the day, right?
For
Early
sure.
1900, like of that, but that playing into it is that, so I'm curious that all of the sociology around that.
For
That is
sure. And I
fascinating.
remember, and I'm sure there were nurses that you worked with back in the day who still were cultured that when a physician came on the unit, you gave them your chair.
Yeah.
Did you have that
Yeah.
when you were a young?
Yes.
Because I did.
Yes. Yes. And 100% whatever they say goes. And so
Yes.
I think we've seen that shift quite a bit. And this is not to dog on, any in particular. I think this is just the culture.
It was.
Um, but
Yeah.
I think we're still as nursing trying to buck that system a little bit, is that it's okay to have your needs met, and we can still be amazing nurses. We can still take fantastic care of our patients and our loved ones.
I think that's
Yeah.
part of why I was noticing it. Like just
Yeah.
noticing what I wonder what that difference is. And
Yeah.
come from a power dynamic? Does it come from a
Mhm.
training difference? I don't know.
A little
But
both,
whatever
probably.
it is, we're definitely allowed to do that, taking care of
Yeah.
stuff, ourselves
Yeah.
stuff, you know?
Good. Well, I think it starts with us, like you said, and when we can, learn to heal ourselves and take care of ourselves, and we start modeling that for others and giving others
Mm,
permission to do that, we start helping others in our circle of influence start to shift their perspective too. So that's pretty cool.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we've got a couple minutes left. I just want to see, is there any like last thoughts, suggestions, advice that you could give, whether that's to a new grad or any of our colleagues as we wrap up?
One of the things that I have been thinking about for my new grads is really the idea that um, inpatient is not what you have to do anymore. Like you are not like the sort of narrative that I was told when I was in nursing school. I'm
Yeah.
sure we're told you had to do 2 years of inpatient and med surg.
Yes.
Um, can be incredibly valuable. You can learn so much.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
if your goal is home hospice, right?
mhm.
If that's your love,
Yes.
then maybe that's not what you need to do. And so I feel like there's a lot of sacred cows that we really
Mhm,
to let retire. And I absolutely feel like people can be hired as new grads straight into inpatient.
mhm.
Like they can get hired straight into home health. They can get hired straight into, we've had nurses amazingly get hired straight into public health, and they're doing
Well,
fantastic. So I read school nursing. So I really encourage new grads to look at what interests them
mhm,
and not feel like, oh, I hated my hospital rotation. It felt icky for me, but I have to do my 2 years of med surg. Do you?
mhm.
Where's the
Right.
freedom? Right? Um, and also, if everyone tells you that this one unit is terrible, but when you did a rotation here, but when you did a rotation there in school, you actually loved it.
Ah,
It's
if
I
it's a
have
good fit for you.
right it then maybe it's a good fit for you. So I don't listen to everybody. Like listen to your gut. I my students laugh. I have started calling their gut their heart mind.
Yes, it's so true. Like literally, there's scientific studies on
Yes.
this. It's fascinating.
I used to be that nurse that I wouldn't know why. Maybe later I would figure it out, or I'd be like, this patient's gonna go septic. This patient's gonna code on my
Yeah,
sheet, right? And so then you get the crash cart and you put it like next to it.
yeah,
After a while, I never second guessed my heart mind.
yes. Trust your
So I,
intuition.
yes. And so I am telling my students when you're on rotations in school, if this one unit just speaks to your heart mind,
Mm,
that's where you need to apply. Even if people are like, you don't want to work in oncology, it's what people told me. You don't want to work on oncology, that's too sad. No, you know what? I did want to work on oncology. That's what my heart mind told me.
yes,
So there's a lot of that I would tell new grads.
I
Yeah.
love it. Oh, this has been such a lovely conversation, Jen. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you guys soon.